She's the one who had them on her phone. No, she claims that Diddy was gonna release them, but Diddy didn't have those tapes. I don't know what she claimed he was supposed to. They said the security guard had to record it. They say the freak off tapes. I'm not saying that other people don't have tapes, but there are certain tapes that they're using that only Cassie has access to. That's what I'm saying. So there are about, I think, about three different tapes that depict sexual, you know what I'm saying, activities that she had on her phone that he does not have. So the argument is that you had those on your phone and you kept them because you were plotting. That's what they're saying. Now, what would you argue if somebody said that? Maybe you would say, I was afraid of what could ultimately happen. I wanted out of this lifestyle. I didn't think anyone would believe me, so I had to get proof. You can argue a lot of different things. But I think when you put it all together, Cassie, that don't look good. That's you asking to get pissed on, you sending text messages off, you having the tapes. It's not looking good, but that doesn't mean that it's just this black and white thing. They said, how do we know that he wasn't using her phone? You know what I think? I think that this case is going to be really, really important in terms of, just the way that we talk about these type of incidents, because this is really important. Every girl do you feel like simply because of the age gap and someone being way older that it's always going to be predatory no matter what? Do you believe it's possible for someone to be of legal age and to be intertwined in a situation with an older man and that they could be at fault? Because we got to just try to lay out how we feel about these things. But when you said maturity matters, when does it matter? So Cassie was what, 19 years old? How old was Cassie when she got with him? 19? If she's 19 and then he's what, by that point 30 something, almost 40, if not 40 something, bitch. Do you automatically look at that as predatory? Or do you feel like it's possible for her to have made her own decisions and maybe there were times where terrible things happened that shouldn't have? But is it also possible that maybe she was a participant, or maybe she does have some type of manipulative tendencies, or maybe she's not as innocent as people think? Someone said her career was in his hands. I remember when Harvey Weinstein was going through what he was going through, and I said this: it's terrible for someone to use their position of power to make someone feel like if they don't follow through with a sexual act that they're not going to get a job. But at what point do we look at the person who wants the job and say, get the fuck up, you just not going to get it then? Because sucking somebody dick because you wanted a job, I understand you feeling like you had to, but baby, you did not have to. Now, hold up now. You there's this idea, it gets to the point where you have to acknowledge you had a choice and you chose the role. You'll listen to some women say, well, he told me I couldn't get the job if I didn't have sex with him. So you might feel like, well, you got up right. No, I had sex with him because I felt like I had to, because I wanted to. No, no. Well, then let's unpack that. Your motive, your intention, your da 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 led you to do something that, led you to make a choice. I think that it's important to say, okay, well, sometimes you will have to sacrifice those things. Somebody said, we don't know that. We talking about Harvey Weinstein. There were absolutely women who said that they did it because they felt like if they didn't, they wouldn't get a role or get a position, or they wanted the lead role. Somebody said, your stance is gross. Well, let's get you on out of here. Bye. So, they say y'all love to act like y'all don't understand. Somebody said, "Is that coercion?" That's what they call it. And then there's this idea that, well, that's rape, and if you have sex, you're still a victim. And that's something that has been difficult for me to come to terms with, because I remember when we went and read up on coercion. And for example, if you're relaxing with a man, if you go to a man's house and y'all watching TV under this fucking coercion shit, y'all can be sitting on the couch and that nigga can ask you for an hour to fuck. Can we have sex? Can we have sex? He can keep on trying. And you can say, no, I'm good, and brush it off, right? If you end up having sex with him, but you leave that apartment, for example, and you say he raped you because he kept asking you to have sex and you felt like you had to, they will consider that coercion. I do not agree with that. I don't agree with that. If someone did not physically, forcibly do something, then I feel like, babe, you have to be able to, first of all, try your best to be mindful of the decisions that you're making and the areas that you're putting yourself in. It would never be your fault that something happened to you in any area, but I think you should be mindful of the spaces that you put yourself in. Um, but I do feel a way about this idea that if you relent, that this is now rape of any sort. Because if a man don't have a fucking weapon saying I'm gonna kill you or something, could you not did because my question would be, did you try to get up and leave? Did this person stop you and force himself on you? Or was it a situation where this person kept asking and was persistent, and then you said, okay, how many times has a nigga continued to ask you on a date until you finally said, okay, I'll give it a chance? Did he force you to go on a date with him? You niggas are persistent. We teach girls that men should chase us and shit like that. So it just gets kind of murky to me when it's time for me to try to understand the coercion piece, because absent of somebody forcibly stopping you and pinning you down to rape you and stuff like that, um you do have fight or flight, so people respond to shit differently. And I understand people feeling like, well, I felt like I had to and I was afraid. I get that 1,000%. But at any point, did you try to leave? Like, if I was in the house with you and I said, I don't want you to go, I want you to stay with me. So you stayed. Do you get to say, if I told you all night I wanted you to stay, do you get to say I kidnapped you because you felt like you couldn't leave? Or how does that work? Someone said it shouldn't get to that. No should be enough. But you have to be realistic. How many times it's in what scenario when you sitting up with somebody chilling, do you say, "Can I have sex with you?" And they say, "No." And that's how that goes. It doesn't work like that typically. Typically, you're sitting up, maybe somebody's rubbing on you, talking to you and trying to advance physically. And maybe you kind of in your movements are rejecting that. You're not out, he not outright asking, you're not saying anything. Sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes, a nigga might try to start taking your clothes off someone or trying to touch on you and stuff like that. And you kind of brush it off a little bit. To me, that's persistence. To me, that's trying it. To me, at that point, if you're uncomfortable, you got to get up. But if a woman see, but y'all are getting into a different, like a different scenario. Because if somebody tells you no, anything after that is force. You understand? So when you make the comment, if somebody says no, then that's it. They don't have nothing to do with what I'm asking you. Because if somebody says no and you follow through with anything, you are forcing yourself on them. I am talking about when you sitting up with somebody and y'all both are sitting there and things are escalating. At what point does it turn into now this is rape because I don't want to do this, but I'm not going to say nothing, but I don't want to do it. I just feel like I have to. How do we like deal with that part? I just think that kind of gets murky. They said some women are timid, especially depending on the age. And do you want to know what I have to say to that? What I have to say to that is it will never be your fault for something happening to you. But if you're too timid to be in a position with a man to tell him that, hey, I'm not trying to have sex with you and get up and at least try to leave, then I don't think you're the type of woman that needs to be going to a nigga house. You understand that? And you don't want to hear that, do you? Oh, you trying to victim blame. I'm not victim blaming no fucking body. I'm telling you what I really think. If you are not equipped to open your mouth and you don't know how to sit up with male company, and this has nothing to do with a man forcing himself on you. This has everything to do with you asserting yourself and being able to say, nah, this is not what I came here for. I gotta go. Not somebody jumping in front of you and stopping you. This is not victim blaming because ain't no crime happened. I'm simply talking about if you were to get uncomfortable at a man's home, if you can't use your voice and say that and get up and leave, then you're not the type of person that I feel like needs to be sitting at a man's house. And you need to understand the type of situation you setting yourself up for when you even go to a nigga's house. You can get raped anywhere. But there are some instances and situations we can put ourselves in that can make us more vulnerable or more susceptible to certain things. And I do think people need to just be all around mindful. That's all. Now, hold on. Now, this was more of a general thing because we're having a conversation about Diddy. So let's go back to Diddy. How do we feel about this idea that Cassie was not a victim? My answer to that is how is she not a victim when you have a man significantly older than her who has been doing this to women? This is a well oiled machine at this point. That deal that she got into, per that the industry, that was a predatory deal. Where's her music? It's not a farce that there are men at the record company telling that girl, your album is not coming out if you don't answer the phone for him. She did at a point, absolutely, I could see, feel like if I don't do this, I don't have a life because she had already signed her name on the paper. What you said, what's not true? When Cassie signed that damn deal, she was fucked. She was fucked because when you sign a deal and you owe all these people all this money you ain't never gonna fucking have, you want to go either you have a choice at the point. Do you want to go fight for your life and live in squalor? Or do you want to go sit up with this nigga? She didn't see a way out. What do I do? That deal was trash. And they said she a victim and a willful participant. Child. It's just it's a mess. It's a mess. But I do think we have to note that a choice was still there. It's just not the choice that she wanted to make. Cassie did not want to live like a refugee. There's some people who have owed millions of dollars to a record company because of a bad deal. And what they do, packed it up and went and worked at McDonald's. Not Cassie. Cassie said, no, I'm not doing it. They say, y'all don't understand how abuse works. Here goes the thing. When it comes to the Diddy situation, when did the abuse start versus when they began doing some of the things she's now using against him? That's the question. Because what I think has happened is, and it's easy to do this, we feel like we know who Diddy is. And we feel like he's done this to other people. So I think there's an assumption that out the gate he was whooping the hoe upside her head and da 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 da. And that may not be what it is, which is why so many people probably feel like, well, wait a minute. I'm not saying that this did not happen, but let's not act like she wasn't down too. You have some women who like shit like what Diddy likes. Do we understand that? Do you understand that you have 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old that like that shit, that are manipulative, that want to be in that lifestyle, that da 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 da, that are making a conscious decision? I'm not putting that on Cassie, but that does happen in the world where two things could be true. You could have a predatory ass nigga, a nasty ass nigga, but you could also have a little girl, 19 or so, that maybe doesn't have a good understanding of the world yet, but she knows she doing wrong and she intends to do wrong. They said, but it doesn't mean it's a fully formed decision. But when you start to do that, then you need to make provisions for the predator too, then, in the way that you have to go and tear him down psychologically and get into him. For example, you talking about people's minds not being fully developed. When did Diddy start doing drugs? Because when you do drugs heavy, your mind gets fucking stunted and you can get trapped in time, so to speak, and caught up. What kind of trauma or shit does he have mentally that could have made him the type of person to da 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 da? It can't just be, you can't just take her age and say, well, she was 19, so she didn't make a fully formed decision. Because we could argue a whole bunch of different points for different people. And somebody said, well, regardless, he abused that woman. We did see an instance of abuse, and I do believe that it was an abusive relationship. But for example, let's take it off of Diddy now. Word on the street is that Ike Turner absolutely abused Tina Turner, but that it wasn't always the way that that movie depicted it. They said Tina would walk up and go knock that nigga upside his head too, and that they would fight, and it would be a back and forth type of thing. The only people that's really gonna ever know what happened was the people that were there. It's just really easy to form an opinion when you feel like you know somebody. We believe that Diddy has been abusive to all of these different women. We believe we feel like he dirty. We feel like he wrong. Somebody said Tina wasn't no hoe. Lord God rest the dead. You don't be knowing these people. You like their songs. I need you to remember that. Okay? You don't be knowing these people. You be liking their songs. Huh, hello? Child, them people was crazy back in the day. They said if someone beats you for 15 days straight and someone hits you back once, is that a back and forth? Let me give you one better, because I don't want to try to understand it. Let me give you one better. Because I've seen that online. I've seen people say Cassie wasn't abusive because if you hit a nigga back, then you fighting for your life. You fighting back. Let's break that down real quick. Pause. Every time somebody puts their hand on you, that's a separate incident. Period. Okay. If Billy hit Mandy on Monday and he initiated that, he dead ass wrong. So Mandy, what did you do that day? Ice your face? Call the cops? Stay? Pack a bag? What did you do? Let's say Mandy didn't retaliate. She stayed. Okay. Then Tuesday, Mandy gets upset at Billy and she slapped Billy. And then Billy don't call the laws and they have a fight and then they go about their business. Are you trying to say because he hit her Monday that it's an abusive relationship and that she was retaliating on Tuesday? That's not how that works. When you are not actively trying to get out of a fucking abusive situation and it's turned into when you get ready, you put your hands on him and he put his hands on you, you don't get to go back and say, well, that person did it first. Even though we be fighting and da 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 da, you don't get to fucking do that because abuse is abuse. They say it's called reactive abuse. But at the end of the day, it's he say, she say about who did it first. You will never know. You will never know who swung first in that relationship. You just know that abuse occurred. And if it's so bad that you feel like I gotta put my hands on him and I'm reacting, where are the cops? Why didn't you leave? You stayed. But then one would argue she had to. They would go pick her up and they had her career in their hands and all of this shit. So it's gonna always go in a circle. It's gonna always go in a circle. Somebody said, I think she eventually started fighting back. And what I say to that is that absolutely could have happened. But that's your conclusion that you've drawn is that's human nature shit. And the conclusion that you've drawn is why they put that fucking tape out. Because they needed everybody who could have possibly been on that jury to feel like that's exactly what was going on. And when Diddy is the one who has a history of being a snake, it's just very, very difficult to not immediately feel like, yep, he did that shit and he initiated it and da 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 da. When we just may not have the full scope. But in my mind, I put it like this. I think that Cassie did make a choice to a certain degree because yeah, she could have packed the shit up and went home poor. So yeah, you felt like, you know what? I want this dream and I want to do it. So I feel like that was the choice. But to me, it doesn't go against the fact that I can't get around that this is me speaking. I feel like Diddy has a pattern, a predatory pattern of fucking abuse that dates back to when that nigga was in college, abusing women physically, manipulating them, controlling them, wanting every second to be accounted for. This man has been doing this before I was even born. Okay. By the time this man comes across Cassie, to me, his mind frame is predatory. Because you had no business looking at no 19-year-old girl. Cassie can't fucking sing. Let's talk about it. Cassie could not sing. She was never doing no 10 fucking albums. That was predatory. That fucking deal was predatory. You wanted to lock her into a position for your own selfish desires, in my opinion. That's why you created that bullshit ass deal for her. Can we say that she should have read the fine print? Of course. Of course. But she should have never been presented with that deal either. So I can say she should have read it and she should have had her ducks in a row. But at 19 years old, we all understand what it's like to be that age and to feel like my life is gonna change. That doesn't make what happens to you after the fact right. That doesn't make them presenting you with that bullshit right. Um, they said, what was her mother? We've seen mothers sitting right next to their kids signing bullshit ass deals. They don't know what the hell they be doing either. Okay? So when it comes to Cassie, I feel like by the time he gives her this deal, that was predatory. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know how much I feel like Cassie was over there getting made to have sex with these people. Because I know enough about the world to know that it's some bitches that like that shit too. It's some bitches that they want a couple of dicks in them at one time. Yes, they do. It's some bitches they want to get pissed on. It's some bitches that like that shit. It is. I think she was down for the cause to a certain degree. I do. I ain't gonna lie. I do. And then I think maybe one day it could have turned into, listen, what are we doing? The partying is cool and all that, but this relationship is hell. This relationship is toxic. Where is my motherfucking music? What's going on? I don't want to do this no more. That's what I think could have happened. I'm purely speculating, but I think that there could have been a moment where party time was over. What we going with my music and shit? And I think it became apparent that baby, we ain't going no damn well because he's still messing with different women, still moving around. And I think at that point, she may have wanted different for her life. And that's when she got locked in. That's when that deal and 10 years, 10 albums and shit, that's when that mattered. After Me and You did well and she had her singles, Official Girl, and all that kind of shit like that, I think once it was time for the next big whoop de whoop, that's when it was like, wait a minute, you just want me to be your girlfriend? I'm trying to be on the scene. I'm trying to, right, doing the movie. He done knocked her upside the head and shit. And I think when she maybe tried to get out of it and have more for herself, maybe that's when it was like, bitch, you ain't going nowhere. I do believe at a point that nigga put her in a position to where she couldn't do nothing. I do. I absolutely believe that he had that woman stalked. I absolutely believe that he was threatening men who were trying to pursue her. I absolutely believe it all. Do I believe that he was drugging her to make her have sex with these people? I need to hear more. I need to hear more. I need to read more. That I won't give an opinion on yet. But I will say, I think that other people may not have been aware of the drug use and shit. But you want to know something too? There's a part of me that feels like when Diddy them side says everybody was willing, we had all this shit available, they knew what was up. I believe that to a degree. I believe that. Do I believe some people could have got raped? Yes, I do. But I also feel like there were people, when you're buying escorts and shit, them people like doing dope. So you ain't gotta force them. And then they getting paid to be a hoe. So shit. When they come over here and it's all these drugs and shit over here, you do what you want to do. Why? Child. They said Cassie put in a request for the news media to not see the freak off tapes because she don't want the media to describe them because they gonna describe it as her looking. They say Cassie on the videos looks to be enjoying it, and the industry is gonna use that against Cassie. I do not feel comfortable sitting up saying that Cassie's not a victim. I do believe she's a victim. I just don't feel like it's this. If it was a spectrum, I think there are people who have been victimized more, but I do feel like she was a victim of sorts. I do. I really do. Because it's very difficult for me not to think about, I have daughters. If an old ass, grown ass, nasty ass motherfucking man is sitting up here filling a 19-year-old's head with a whole bunch of shit that has a certain lifestyle and money and da 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 da, I could see how a young, impressionable girl could sign her fucking life away and get caught up in some shit she don't understand because you're moving too goddamn fast. I feel like I can see that. But I also come from places where I know 19-year-old girls, or I've known 19-year-old girls who plot on niggas like Diddy. They get dressed up, going to events, hoping to see Diddy. Have you ever been in the city when it's All Star weekend? There are girls, when I was growing up, there were teenage girls, 17, 17-ish, getting ready to go out, hoping to see and get snatched up by a basketball player or a rapper or something. That's their goal. There are women and young women who get up and get dressed and they go into the club because such and such gonna be there. I heard he like this. I heard there are people who they be plotting on these niggas. Yes. And girl, I heard he like this. And if you do this like this and that, yeah. Everything is not an old nasty ass man. Well, yeah, if they participate in nasty, but sometimes you got some girls who shit that was up their alley. So you got to get it out your head that just because it was a 19-year-old girl, that there's no way in hell that listen, live a little longer. They said that's true, but I don't think that was the case with Cassie. Let me ask a question, not to you personally, but to everybody. If it was a dark skinned black woman up there, would people have the same thoughts and feelings? I don't think y'all can see Cassie like that. I don't. I don't. Baby girl said I don't see color. I would feel the same way on some shit. They said people feel bad for Kim Porter. So they said, do you remember that big girl that said Usher did something to her? Yeah. And I remember how she was a laughing stock because they said that Usher could never be interested in a woman like her. I remember that. They said, let's do another variable. They said, would y'all be able to see Cassie in a different light if she was unattractive? All I'll say is this is a damn mess. And I personally do think that Cassie was victimized. I just think that it's not a black and white situation. This was not a old pimp walking up and down the street, snatched a girl from high school and made her start prostituting. And now she's gotten into sex trafficking, and this is a clear cut situation. No, 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 no. We working with different variables. We're working like just under different circumstances. It's not black and white. It's not black and white. Somebody said there is no perfect victim, right? But in this case, I don't feel like it's simple as it could be in other circumstances, under different circumstances. I do think that Cassie was a victim. I just think it's not the typical type of shit that we're used to. So I think that this victim just looks a little bit different. That's what I think. And I think that people like Diddy don't ever try to sit up and act like they take that same influence to try to make you feel like you better not fuck with them. But when you tell them that their influence scares you and their reputation preceding them made you feel like you had to do something, they start playing crazy. Diddy went to a gym and beat the coach with a fucking dumbbell. Do you understand? He beat the shit out of that nigga that ended up suing him from the record company. You don't think people hear about that? And all of the other things that he's did behind the scenes that people don't know about. Diddy's reputation precedes him. But the very moment that you say, well, I was afraid, it's like, oh, how could you be afraid? What the fuck are you talking about? Are you talking about the nigga Cassie not a victim to a certain degree at least when this nigga done blown up someone else's car? Hello? How the fuck do you move on when every time you try to move on, this nigga threatens people? Michael was Michael B. Jordan even fucking mentioned because Diddy didn't call his motherfucking phone right with no repercussions. Even to this point, we'll see what happens. But Diddy didn't get in trouble for blowing up nobody's car. So could you imagine being a girl, the 19-year-old young woman in that situation, and you afraid? I can. That influence and that power and people willing to be pawns for these people is scary. It is. So yeah, I do think Cassie was a victim. I just think that this is a very layered situation, and I think we're gonna gonna hear some things that are gonna make us feel uncomfortable. And actually, I'm more afraid for what this case could do in terms of damage for other victims coming forward. Because per these circumstances and based on the way that this case goes and the way that the general public perceives Cassie in the end, that's gonna affect the way that they regard young ladies in that situation moving forward. They gonna write them off, to a certain degree based on, well, do you remember she was over there doing such and da 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 and all that kind of shit like that. So that's why I think it's really really important that we're clear on how we feel about this situation, what happened, because I would hate for a young woman to get caught up and into anything and feel like, well, look at what they did to Cassie. Look at how they did Cassie. And if I at any point participate, it's gonna get used against me, and then you're gonna have people being more ashamed. You understand what I'm saying? They said, well, that's gonna happen regardless. But it would get worse, and we can't make a change if it's still happening and we're adding to it. Is my point. That's what I think. Um, I think it's important to note that Cassie was okay with taking her money and going on. Cassie was not trying to be no advocate for nobody else. Cassie was not worried about you niggas at all. Took their money and went and sat down. Them people then looked into it and said, look, uh-uh. So it's going to be a lot of different things to consider. And you have 8 men sitting on that jury. I don't know if 8 men going to think Diddy wrong. When the world we live in, I don't know. And let me tell you why I couldn't be on that jury. And let me tell you what's happening with Diddy. Me, and I believe other people, want Diddy to face consequences for all the other shit that we feel like he did in life. Go ahead, mama. In life, period. I feel like a lot of the shit that be discussed don't even be having a lot to do with what he's actually being charged with. I think we just feel like he's a guilty ass nigga that needs to go to jail. But I think that's clouded so much of our judgment. There's a question right now in the courts. The courts then basically filed a paper. They said, why don't y'all give these people this little questionnaire? Because the way that the media portrayed the freak off situation, it has a negative connotation to it already. How does he get a fair trial? That's the argument today. How does he get a fair trial when everybody that heard the word freak off and immediately it has a negative association? Child, we gonna see what they do with that. So it's sticky. It's sticky, child. And that's the downside to all this shit playing out publicly. To me, that's one of the negatives of the media getting involved and it becoming a circus versus being able to go to court and let those details come out. Because people get a hold of these lawsuits, dissect them, and then people draw conclusions. You have to remember that a lawsuit is nothing more than a document full of claims. You can claim anything, that does not make it a fact. But what Americans do, what the average person does is they read a lawsuit and they accept it as a fact. It is very difficult to get the average Joe to understand or differentiate between truth and accusation. But a lot of people feel like whoever filed that paperwork first, that's the one. So, child, this is a mess. But I do feel like Cassie is a victim, and I feel like there are more victims. And I just think Diddy should go to jail, bitch. I think he shot that woman in the face. All of that. I think he's done a lot of shit. But this case ain't about him shooting somebody in the face. This case is about child sex trafficking and da 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 da. So I wouldn't be impartial. I would be biased because I already got my own thoughts and feelings on Diddy. I've had it in my mind that Diddy was a bad person my whole life. Actually, my earliest memories of Bad Boy and Diddy and anything was him fucking people over. So shit, you asking me? I've always regarded him as a slimy businessman and a bad man, and he's always been spoken about that way. He's always been the big bad wolf, so to speak. I've always known him to have a temper. That's always been a word. Abusive and violent, all of that. So by the time it gets to Cassie, shit, I'm with it. Lock him up. I believe it. But you have to be fair and listen to everything. So we will see.